So speaking of like kind of creating buzz for stuff, one thing I was very much fascinated with how you launch your products is the crowdfunding element of it. I guess BestSelfCo got its start on Kickstarter, but now that you have like a big email list and all these customers and all this notoriety from like Damon John and stuff promotes your stuff, you still launch on Kickstarter. What like can you tell me about like that whole process? Like why do y'all do that?
So before Best Self, I launched, I think Best Self, the first self journal was my fourth Kickstarter, but my first with Best Self. And so I know that, before you put a new product into the market is really helpful to get validation.
Uh-huh.
And did you know Peloton started on Kickstarter?
I did not.
It did.
Really?
It raised $300,000. Yeah.
Whoa.
In 2013. So it's a great way to collect pre-orders for something that doesn't yet exist.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, the self journal, we our pricing and our reward levels was based on our minimum order quantity, which is like 2,000 or something like that. And so all of our pricing is based on that. But at our Kickstarter, we ended up pre-selling 10,000 units. And so, all of our pricing is based on that, but we have way better margins. And so we ended up producing 30,000 units, and those 20,000 were what we were able to use to launch our store. And so I always teach people with Kickstarter, it's like, how do you kickstart a product, but then create an eco cycle so you don't have to keep going back to Kickstarter for the same product.
Mm-hmm.
The second time we went back to Kickstarter was for this adjustable Hourglass, which was completely outside of our wheelhouse and a completely new product. So the thought of, okay, let's just create 2,000 of these and try to sell them was like a ton of risk. And I haven't really talked about this publicly, but that Kickstarter, while it was successfully funded, it was not a success for the company. It was a complete mess. We funded it, and in the back of my mind, I knew going in, I'm like, this could go wrong because the prototype that we had, there was some issues with it that weren't quite right. Mm-hmm. And so when you go into mass production, or try to go into mass production, you have to get that part right. And we like struggled, and I wish we'd never done it in Kickstarter, but had we not, we would have lost money both ways. So I'm glad that we did it on Kickstarter so that we weren't, didn't print it or print. We didn't create a ton of product that was now sitting in a warehouse somewhere. But I always say, like, go to Kickstarter or another crowdfunding site for validation that you're actually solving a problem and that people will pay for it. And then don't keep going back for Kickstarter for the same thing. So I know, like, there's some journals that are yearly, and every single year it's like the new Kickstarter, which I'm kind of like, you could just launch your store and do it. But I know it makes sense because there's so many organic people that just shop on Kickstarter. But if you are coming out with a completely different product and you're not really sure where it's going to go, I would go back to Kickstarter because you have an email list, but it's not as much risk as the company just, producing it and then trying to sell it later.
Huh. I don't know. Like, while researching some of your products, I was like, damn, I didn't realize you did so many Kickstarters for all of these. That's a great way to validate.
Yeah.
That's really awesome. Does it, so I personally kind of will, I'm a dropper of content. I'll record something and then just be like, oh, here it is. And I'll notice some people kind of making a buzz about stuff. They'll be like, this video is coming out on this day. And like in my mind, I'm like, I don't care. But then like they keep talking about it. And by the end, I'm like, all right, I'm going to watch that video.
Yeah.
Right. Does Kickstarter generate quite a buzz like that normally? Like just by the nature of it?
It does if you generate your own buzz first. So Kickstarter will reward people that bring people to the platform. They're not going to just, if you don't send any traffic, they're not going to be like, oh, we're going to just show you on all these pages because we want to help you out. And so they will reward people that bring their own traffic and back a campaign, because their whole goal is like, how many people can we get to pledge on here? Because once people pledge once on Kickstarter, they're likely to come back again. And so once you get people in the door, they will start showing your project to more people. So say I'm launching Peloton, which is $1,000 bike, and I'm not launching it, someone else's, but I love Peloton. And then I'm launching a journal, right? So $1,000 bike, they get 10 backers, $10,000, and I'm selling a journal. It's $32, and I get, 500 people. I get less revenue than the Peloton, but Kickstarter likes me more because I've got more eyeballs on my project. And so the number of backers counts more than the amount pledged. And so even if people, say you're like sending it to your email list, right? And someone wants to support you, but they don't really want whatever it is you're selling.
Mm-hmm.
They can still support at a $1 level, and that will help you with Kickstarter and their algorithm. So like I always tell people, have a $1 reward level because you get their email after, and sometimes people want to support but they don't want the thing, and you should still allow them to do that.
That's a great idea. Huh. I never even thought about that. Wow, that's actually really cool. Now you've helped a bunch of other Kickstarter campaigns, right?
Yeah. I coached people for a while, and now I have I basically created a course because people were like, okay, how do I do it? And that was after the first few. And then when I launched the self-journal, I was like, okay, I actually know what I'm doing, because I hate when people do something once and they create a course.
Mm-hmm.
But the people I've coached have raised over like $2 million in funding,
Oh, wow.
way overfunded.
I think more so than just getting the funding, it's just like getting the validation there.
Yeah.
Like how do you, if you have a product, how do you know? Like that adjustable rate Hourglass. I remember seeing that. I was like, that's a really cool product. Do I want one? Will other people want one? And I guess like the market speaks for itself.
Well, I mean, people wanted it, but it was technologically ridiculous. No other word for it. It was also funny when we were creating it, and there was this, we had one of our people that was no longer with us was helping with the design, and at one point like added this really ugly thing to it to like change the intervals or whatever. And I'm like, that can't be there. And I was like, I know you're trying to save costs, but if this thing doesn't look sexy, nobody is going to want it, because nobody needs an adjustable hourglass. Like nobody. It's not like, I'm going to finally be able to tell the time. It's like, if it doesn't look sexy on your desk, nobody's buying it. So like that needs to be like number one. Like if Apple made an hourglass you could adjust, that's what we're looking for. So that's the most important thing. Oh, and
it costs like $500, but it'd be an awesome hourglass.
Yeah.
Is Kickstarter still the best way to promote? Or like, I know there's like Indiegogo, and then I guess for digital stuff, there's Product Hunt, but Product Hunt is more just about like free kind of things they're putting out. I don't know if there's like, does it work the same with Product Hunt or any of those other platforms?
I don't know Product Hunt that well. I always just think about for like apps and tools like that. I have seen a couple of Kickstarters, but it doesn't seem like it's a big for that. And then Indiegogo, never used that. I think Kickstarter is more it's the more popular platform for people, but sometimes there's specific categories that people like, supplements and things like that. I don't think you can launch on Kickstarter, so you might go to Indiegogo for that. So it depends on what it is that you're launching. But if you can launch on Kickstarter, like category wise, I always just tell people like do that, because that's where there's more people.
And Kickstarter has to be a physical product, right? It can't be digital.
Unsure. They might have changed stuff, but I think maybe you can have digital now. I think.
Well, product hunt, I enjoy browsing Product Hunt, but the problem is it's just like popular things. So remember like GPT-3 came out recently.
Yeah.
And there's like every person's making like a little GPT-3 app or something like that, a little AI kind of thing that you type in a word and it'll guess the next word or something. But the problem is, then like 5 months later, you look at all those apps and they're either like down, not, their HTTPS isn't updated. And you like can tell like the developer like just like skipped out on it. I think the difference is with Kickstarter, people are actually plunking down real money. I think like our buddy Pat Flynn, like he recently did one very successfully. I think that's like the most important thing. So there's not many other ways besides Kickstarter to do that, right?
Yeah, I think Kickstarter is the best one.
It's
and
like
then
the
another
OG and the best. Yeah.
Thing about Kickstarter is that they have so many organic people on there. Like I used to shop on Kickstarter, like, and the great thing about it is it's like a secret Santa to yourself, because you buy something that you like, and then 2 years later, something comes to your door, and you're like, oh yes, and you completely forgot about it. So it's good in that sense, but I think there's like stats on the Kickstarter website of how much like people come back 2-3 times. And so for each campaign that I ran, I think like between 30 and 38% of people were organic from Kickstarter. So the amount funded was not traffic driven by me, but it was like from the platform itself.
That's awesome. Well, that's also important because, I mean, your customers like your stuff. So you're like, okay, great. But then it's almost like too easy.
Yeah.
It's like a comedian going into a room of people. Like, he knows they're going to laugh. So is it possible to generate buzz for like blog posts, like videos, all that kind of stuff? Like, do you do that? Do you use like some sort of like techniques like you use in Kickstarter to generate blog posts for any content, or not
Sometimes
really?
I do for my personal stuff
Mhm.
rather than for Best Self. We have the community of people, so we kind of gauge like what people are talking about, what they'd like to hear about, and that's what drives some like videos or blog posts that we do.
Mhm.
Like one thing someone was talking about, which got a lot of comments in our community, was like how to use the self journal for self-care. And so that ended up becoming a whole topic.
Mhm.
Like now we have a whole kind of like a guide on it. And so that started from a Facebook comment by someone that just got a lot of engagement. And we were like, okay, that's something that we should probably create some content around.